Hi, I'm Steve Hoskinson, and this is the End of Trauma podcast. The end of trauma. Why are we talking about such an outrageous idea? Because obviously, they're making trauma faster than we can fix it. The end of trauma really is an outgrowth of our work in organic intelligence. And Organic Intelligence is an organization I founded some years ago because there's a new paradigm, there's a new way of understanding how we work and how our biology works. So I want to share that with you today. And, mostly my sharing has been in an international training and consulting role. And I've been training trauma therapists around the world for nearly 20 years. And that really came out of my early days coming out of clinical psych school, working as a therapist and sitting and being helpful to people. And I realized, of course, that you can only help one person per hour. And so in order to share some help on a more broad basis, I began to teach so that then those who learned with me could be helpful and we could really distribute the support around. And so I mostly have been talking with therapists and training therapists. But now, given technology and given this podcast format, I can speak on a more broad basis, really, with a limitless audience. And so this is an effort to really share information that can be helpful on a wider basis. Thank you for tuning in then to this inaugural podcast. And what we'll get here is today, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of organic intelligence. It's a clinical protocol, so it's useful for therapists. But our heart trainings are called heart trainings, one, because we want to remind all of us to be able to come from the heart more and more. But it also is an acronym, and it stands for Human Empowerment and Resiliency Training. Human Empowerment and Resiliency Training. And that human empowerment is based in the idea that our human biology can be self-organizing. It can really be self-healing if we know the right conditions. And I train people to see and support the right conditions for the natural healing that can happen in one's body and mind and soul. And that human empowerment especially is oriented toward support for injustice and support for activists, people that are really trying to bring support to life on the planet. So if that is part of your aim, to express a loving nature on this planet, a compassionate nature, a mindful presence on this planet, on this wee Earth ship that we are on. If this sounds like a good idea to you, listen up. We've got some support coming your way, and you're exactly who I want to be talking to. And resiliency training. Resiliency is often thought of as, and often spoken of in the literature, as the ability to bounce back. But that's resiliency and skills that are necessary, but we're really not talking so much about the end game being skills or the things that I can do. The end game is the understanding that my biology can pick up the slack. I work with people, I work with veterans in particular, who are often told that if they are able to do all the things that are prescribed, that they'll get better. And so they're taught meditation, they're taught relaxation, they're taught yoga, they're taught cognitive behavioral approaches, they're taught exposure processes, and they are taught all of these things to be doing with the promise that if they do those things, they will get better. And typically, many of those things help to some degree. The problem comes that many times it does not actually completely really cause a system change. It's the difference, the organic intelligence difference is the difference between like organizing your room, so that the space is efficiently used and things are orderly and neat and you know where everything is. But if you bring in more stuff, no matter how organized you are, if there's too much stuff in there, it's just going to be crowded, cramped, and not work very well. So if you have an addition, if you have more space, a bigger room, a larger apartment, then the organization is much easier, and that's what we do. We don't provide ways of just moving things around and organizing things better. We give more space, and that more space is biological capacity. That more space is more efficient system operation. The work that we do in organic intelligence is I train therapists and others to begin to see that the biology, the human biology, the human being client in front of them is all the time trying to send itself signals for self-organization. It's sending itself signals for better operation. But those signals get lost because there is something else that happens first. That something else is what in organic intelligence we call the what's wrong attention. The what's wrong attention is our fatal attraction to the problem, the fatal attraction to what's wrong. There are many reasons why our attention goes like that, but if you think about it, I'm here in northern coastal San Diego County where my kiddos are surfing on an ongoing basis and playing soccer year-round and enjoying the Southern California lifestyle. And here we understand that waves happen. Waves come in sets, and there are waves of information from the human biology that are meant to be supportive, but that are lost. These waves are not ridden because of sharkophobia, like being in the ocean and being unable to ride the waves or enjoy the water because of fear, like fear of sharks or fear of drowning, something like that. Things that may actually be a very minuscule risk. I'm not poo-pooing sharkophobia, by the way. I have a good case of it, but it is unreasonable, and it impinges. The people are telling us to stop and smell the roses, but what if your biology is saying, run, look out, be careful, or just shut down, hide? All of these ways that trauma and we'll get to the definition of trauma, all of these ways that our attention gets hijacked toward looking around for what's wrong. We have the 5 freeway here is just a mile away, and on the 5 freeway you can sit for hours and in a 5-mile traffic jam, and you're thinking, wow, this must be a major pileup, and then you drive by 5 miles later and see that somebody has a flat tire. But everybody, of course, is slowing down and looking over, going, oh, what is it? Or if you're trying to meditate, you sit and you go, okay, now I need to meditate. I need to relax. Oh, I'm going to breathe in and breathe out. Oh, man, I forgot to answer that email. Oh, sorry, I got to meditate. Okay, now I'm going to breathe in and breathe out. Oh, my knee begins to hurt, and now my shoulder and my neck. Oh, wait a minute. No, I got to settle down. I got to relax a little bit. I really need to. Did I turn my ringer off? Oh, I wonder if I got any text messages. Did anybody respond to my Facebook post? Right? There are all of these habitual ways that the attention gets pinged by what's wrong. In his book, Buddha's Brain, Rick Hanson calls this the negativity bias, saying we are predisposed, the biology is predisposed to look out for what's wrong. I'm not sure I agree with that we're predisposed in that direction, but I am sure that that's the current addiction. Our current addiction is to intensity, toward what's wrong, and it means that our attention, isn't as free as we would like it to be. There is a big, beautiful, caring condition that is our world around us, that is nature at every moment offering us beauty that we may not be able to access. And that's because of this what's wrong attention. However, the what's wrong attention is not just due to trauma. The what's wrong attention is due to the fact that our biology is living in a strange, strange land now. Our biology expects something really different because our biology, our body, evolved not in the houses and apartments and domiciles that we live in these days. We evolved as hunter-gatherers, right? We evolved as tribal beings. We are one of the most social species on the planet. And up until like yesterday, in terms of human evolution, we lived like that. The domestication of plants and animals, anthropologists are pointing this out, the domestication of plants and animals was really the place where our species made this radical U-turn and began to do something really different. And that different thing was, instead of being nomadic, tribal folks that were living in small groups, we became sedentary. We became fixated around, say, food storage. Granaries began to happen, and instead of being small, mobile groups, we became large city-states, and this was really the beginning of the end of our ancestral lineage culture. And with the domestication of plants and animals in many different areas around the globe, around 15,000 years ago, we began to develop the things like division of labor. Right? We would live in smaller and larger cities, basically, and then private property came around, ownership of nature came around, the notion of storage and control of resources became tied to survival. So if I have more food, or I can get somebody else's food, or get somebody else's land, then I have selective advantage. I'm more likely to be safe, and so on. All of this hoo-ha really began 15,000 years ago with the domestication of plants and animals. And in that, we lost this intrinsic embeddedness in nature and in relationship to one another in tribe. So our biology expects that, but now, from nearly all of us, especially in the sort of the Indo-European post-colonial age, in the colonization periods that have effectively, really exterminated tribal existence, we are now effectively a tribe of people on the planet looking for our tribe. And this biology expects that. And the tribe and our original environment gave us something really unique. And that unique thing was the ability to be reintegrated, right? That our basic characteristics as a human species is that we are the singing and dancing species. We're the storytelling species. We are the craft-making species around the fire. And all of these gifts, all of these skills, singing, dancing, rhythm, storytelling, help us re-knit the fabric of our social structure, re-knit our relationship to ourselves and one another. And this really gets to the heart of why organic intelligence is here and why I want to talk to you today. Because that re-knitting is the reintegration, and the thing that does for our biology and in, say, rhythm and dancing is that we're all doing this thing together. Have you ever watched soccer teams warm up, professional soccer teams? We had the World Cup this summer. Have you ever seen how these professionals warm up? They will jog. They'll jog, say, they'll all get in a line, and then they'll start and they will run slowly about 10 yards. They'll turn around and then they'll come back 10 yards. Then they'll turn it around, they'll go 20 yards, and then they'll come back 20 yards. They don't need to do that all together. But by doing the same thing at the same time, in more or less the same rhythm, they build rapport. They build connection. And our basic empathic capacity is collective being together. And the feeling of that and the empathic ability is teamwork. And that teamwork is what makes the difference in soccer and sports. And it really is calling upon our basic nature as synchronized beings. And synchrony is really beginning to get at the whole reason that we are an organism in the first place. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about what is it that makes us a system, a human organism? Well, we live in a really interesting time right now where the biologists are speaking to the physicists who are speaking to the mathematicians, and we now understand the mechanisms of biological synchrony. We'll talk about this quite a bit in the upcoming podcasts that are here on the end of trauma. But this is really now the new understanding of what trauma really means. Trauma is a misnomer, and it's just another way of looking at what's wrong. And what I'm trying to communicate into the world of therapy is what is wrong is the attention to what's wrong, including the focus on trauma. Instead, what we need to understand about trauma and about suffering is that it has to do with biological desynchrony, the way our biology has lost its efficient operation. It's like a car. You know, if your car is not running smoothly and efficiently, you may take it in to get a tune-up, which means that you're taking it to someone who can then register how synchronized the pistons are working, how synchronized those spark plugs are causing the combustion. That means that all of the work is happening rhythmically and systematically and thus efficiently. Our biology is a biology because it knows how to do that naturally. The most basic function of the human biology and other biologies as well that are systems, not just single cell systems, but the most basic reason we are an organism is because our system knows how to sync its component parts. Your heart's pacemaker is 10,000 cells, and they're all ticking. They're all ticking. 10,000 cells ticking. But they're not ticking like if you walked into a clock shop and all the clocks are ticking at different times. Instead, they know instantly and intrinsically how to tick together. How to tick together. Those 10,000 cells synchronize, and that's what makes them a system. That's what makes it the sinoatrial node. That's what makes it this organized system that will send signals to the heart to contract and relax and contract and relax, right? And it's that synchrony and how well that system is synchronized that makes us efficiently operating. If you have a heart arrhythmia, for instance, that's an example of a system that is in desync. And what we work with in organic intelligence is understanding that a system that is desynced wants to resync. Our ancestors didn't walk out of the late Pleistocene with just a knapsack on their back and saying, okay, now, we're headed to the good ship capitalism and we're going to dominate nature and create frankenfood so we can have a better life. No, they brought with them this intrinsic nature of synchrony. We still have everything that we need in our biology to synchronize, to work efficiently, to be well. What we're missing is something from the environment. We walked out of our ancestral environment and ran away from home, and now we find ourselves surrounded by the age of disintegration. And in this age of disintegration, we are searching desperately for the tools of reintegration or resynchrony, resynchronizing. So we are unfortunately missing these tools because we are in all systems, and this is a system property really, all systems are self-reinforcing. Remember, there's a quote I think by Einstein that says, the solution for a problem will not arise from the system in which the problem exists. And the reason for that is that the information arising from a system is self-sustained. That what's wrong attention sustains the system in its fixed point. And that's not just pathology. That's not just some sort of error of the biology. What that is an important biological principle, which is stability. Our biology says, well, yeah, maybe we've got, limitation in abilities or some limitation of information processing or a limitation in ability to handle intense emotion and so on, but at least it's stable. What is threatening to the biology is destabilization, right? If a system destabilizes, it may not survive. If a heart arrhythmia, for instance, becomes too much, that's a survival threat. So stability is a value. So we have then systems that self-reinforce stability. And then what organic intelligence is going to provide is the support for another side of the biology that wants to heal and grow its capacity and increase its synchrony, increase and return to greater capacity, because that's a value too. This notion of creating a bigger room, that's creating bigger bandwidth. That's creating more information processing ability, because that is what the biologists would call, that's a selective advantage also. That gives me a better survival chance. Survival chance because I can process more complex input. And what is the most complex input? Well, survival threats, that's for sure, but also living in community, living with other human beings and in relationship to other human beings. That's a complex prospect. If you've ever been in a family, you know what that's like. So this is called the end of trauma, not because we are going to end trauma, right? And they're making trauma faster than we can fix it, especially in this age of political and social chaos. But our biology still wants to reorganize. So there is the principle of stability, and at the same time, there is the necessity and the impulse biologically of expansion of capacity. Again, because it is to our advantage to grow spare capacity. And what I'm talking about now is that people are, and you know this probably as well as anyone, we spend a lot of time, consciously and unconsciously, just trying to feel okay, just trying to get managing anxiety, managing depression, managing the demands of living in the world that is worryingly complex. And that has a toll on our sleep, on our relationships, on our well-being. But well-being doesn't come from just better management. It doesn't come from just by organizing my little apartment better. It comes by growing room and capacity. In other words, to let the biology do the heavy lifting of well-being. If our biology can help us feel okay, then all of the energy, all of the effort that has been going toward just feeling better and feeling okay and getting okay or getting things done, that energy can go into something else. And that something else is being in our nature, being in our nature of humanity. That human nature is, of course, social, and the social currency that we have for living together is pleasure. It is joy. It is engagement, it's interest, it's curiosity. My daughter and I last night were watching a Disney special on the Monkey Kingdom, and in that, Jane Goodall showed up, this amazing primatologist who for 50 years, had really pioneered the study of chimpanzees, and in this movie we were looking at macaques. And you see their amazing curiosity and their amazing exploration and their amazing social ability and their incredible organization and all of that. We humans have similar interest in exploration, in curiosity. Now, the camera folks in this film were having issues because they were trying to hold the camera still while these macaques were doing hilarious things, and the camera people would just be laughing, and the camera would be shaking. So they actually were having issues shooting this film because they were laughing so much. And that's our next of kin, the chimps, these primates. This is us too, and we have this nature of like caring, and it's not the only thing that we have, right? I mean, there's lots of other stuff, but we have lost in this compromise of biological synchrony. We have too much lost our curiosity, and we want to regain our capacity for connection, for curiosity, for joy, for engagement, right? And this is our nature, and organic intelligence is going to offer an avenue for the recollection of that. I live by a street here that's mostly very quiet, but it's also like the Grand Prix at times. And by the way, do you know the Formula One is very popular in Europe? It's Indy type cars. These are some of the most sophisticated automobiles in the world, and these are race cars, and they're basically airplanes on wheels. And so there is a man named Ross Brawn who's with the team McLaren. And they tune these cars with the most sophisticated instrumentation in the world. The most sophisticated instrumentation in the world, because do you know who the most highly paid athletes in the world are? Formula One drivers. Right? This is big money. This is big business. And they would tune McLaren cars, and they would tune these cars when McLaren was dominating. They would tune them with this sophisticated instrumentation, and then they would bring in their expert engineer, and then the expert engineer would do this. He would listen. He would listen with his ears. He would listen with his human biology at the tuning of that car. More sophisticated than all of the most sophisticated instrumentation in the world. Our human biology knows how to do this, knows how to listen, knows how it sounds when things are in harmony. Our nature is harmony. Our nature is compassion. Our nature is curiosity. And when that comes back online, then we can connect. So the mission of organic intelligence is to support you in coming back into your own nature so that easily you can express yourself and your human nature, because we know that that expression will be kindness, compassion, and caring for life on the planet. There's a Pulitzer Prize winning psychobiologist by the name of E.O. Wilson. And E.O. Wilson says, our nature is biophilia, love of life. And we can get back to that if we are not struggling with the suffering of our biology that is biological desynchrony. So all the time, your system and mine is sending signals that are meant to help us reorganize. But we're missing those signals because of the what's wrong attention, the strange attractor of what's wrong. And with organic intelligence, we're going to offer something else. And we'll have to do some work. And if you're willing to join with me and the rest of the OI, Organic Intelligence community, we are working with this notion of a very special quality of effort. We have a mantra, and here's the mantra of organic intelligence. We'll have refrigerator stickers. Contact me if you want one. We'll get you these stickers. Put them on your refrigerator. Here's the mantra. It says, the job is enjoyment. The job is enjoyment. That's right. Our human bonding, the currency of connection is pleasure, is connection and pleasure and joy and curiosity. So in order to do battle with the strange attractor and the addiction to what's wrong, the what's wrong attention, this negativity bias, there are two things that we'll begin with. And one of those things will become an orientation to pleasure. That's not going to be sufficient. It's only just one early step. It's an initial condition. But the other is more simple. So in this podcast series, I'm going to give you tools, and I'm going to create programs for you to be able to get in here and use our online resources. We have a whole library of support for our members, and I'm going to get you a program that will help in this. But the first step is to begin to give your brainstem different information than the what's wrong attention wants you to have. And that's not by paying attention to what's wrong, but by paying attention to what is. And what is getting the attention outside into the real world. The system of self-reinforcement of what's wrong is the internal system. This is contrary to a lot of mindfulness. It's contrary to where I have a lot of dialogue. And it's contrary to a lot of therapy. In therapy, as therapists, we are trained to help people focus on their emotions, on their thoughts, on their sensations. What are you feeling is one of the most common questions asked in therapy, or in the areas where I teach a lot in the somatic psychotherapy world. What's the body sensation? But those signals from a biology that is desynchronized will simply, mostly, desync. That will probably just reinforce that same system in order to create stability. We need something else. And so that something else is so simple. There's if you've heard of like the butterfly effect, or if you've heard of fractals, organic intelligence is a fractal system, and we're really using complexity science to understand this complex system of biology. And my job is to break that down and turn complexity into simplicity, so you can take it home and use it for your life, for your family, for your kiddos, for people in your community, for your organizations that are trying to do some good in the world. And this Yale mathematician named Benoit Mandelbrot, if you've heard of the Mandelbrot set, he wrote a book called Fractal Geometry, and said in a paper, he wrote this paper that said, the title of it was, How Long is the Coastline of Great Britain? And the coastline of Great Britain is about 11,000 miles around, but he said, that's in miles. If you measure it in yards, it's much bigger. Or if you measure it in feet, still bigger. And if you measure it in inches, it's huge. And that was his mathematical point. That is, he was saying, if you measure in smaller and smaller ways, you get a bigger and bigger number because you're measuring all the variation of the shape of the coastline of Great Britain. So the smaller the unit of measure, like the smaller you're measuring the coastline with, the closer the answer to that question becomes nearly an infinite. Like the coastline of Great Britain, if you measure it in like flea steps, is nearly infinite. But his point to the rest of his mathematicians was this. He said, if you want to know about the nature of nature, you can't use linear measures. You have to let go of Euclidean geometry and use what he called fractal geometry. He said because linear measure, like knowing that the coastline of Great Britain is 11,000 miles, that's useful if you want to like know how much fuel you need to sail around it. But if you want to describe nature, if you want to know about the nature of nature, you have to use non-linear measures. And that's what fractal is. Fractal means self-similarity, and it means non-linearity. And most of psychology that is offering solutions for trauma and for stress are linear solutions. Organic intelligence uses nonlinear solutions and the fractal understanding. And fractal, in this case, is just the way that nature works, and we are like that. On our website, we'll have many visual examples of fractal, but you can look it up. And the thing that we are doing is describing nature more realistically and understanding our human biology in terms of its self-organizing principles, which include some very simple steps. And Mandelbrot said this. He said, I have this amazing superpower. My amazing superpower is to show somebody something that they've never seen before. I'll show them something that they have never, ever seen before, only to hear them say, oh yeah, of course. Oh yeah, of course. This is what I'm hoping to offer you. Simple ideas that are self-evident, but that you may not have ever seen before. The first one is this. Instead of doing what is the normal reflection of interior experience, thought, sensation, emotion, and so on, image, and all the things that we've been told are important, let's do this. Let's come back to our senses. Let us be in the physical world first. Let's start there. Let's bring our attention into the external world. Organic intelligence calls this orientation, connecting to the environment through the senses. And this is just a Zen-like simplicity, coming back to our senses, connecting to the environment through the senses, which means just seeing, just hearing, just feeling the tactile sense of, say, the chair that you may sit in. And to register that simple awareness of the physical properties. I'm seeing color, I'm seeing texture, I'm seeing shape. Very, very simple. This is giving the brainstem a really different information than what's wrong. Over the course of this podcast, I'm going to offer you simple and deceptively simple ideas that are coming out of the complexity science. And I will give you these ideas to try to see if it makes a difference. And that's really all I would suggest. I'm not suggesting that we believe these ideas dogmatically, but test for yourself. And if the ideas make sense, if they feel well, if they help you, then let's continue. All right? So the first notion is orientation, simply connecting to the environment through the senses. In future podcasts, I'll give you more ideas because this orientation to pleasure is key, but it is something that takes some refinement. We'll work on this in the program that I'll have coming up around the end of trauma. And we'll begin to give our biology feedback from your nature, this nature of compassion. So this is the end of trauma. We have a lot of support from our ancestral past, and I would like to invite you to participate as deeply as you care to. In the end, we're going to find ourselves. We're going to find connection, and we're going to find what is meaningful. If we want a meaningful engagement, I have to be able to feel that, which means my biology has to come back online. It has to come back into resync. And the rising, with every rising and setting of the sun, is another opportunity to get back into sync with nature and with our own nature. For nearly 20 years, I've taught coaches and therapists, body therapists, teachers, mindfulness teachers, parents, and I want to offer now you this opportunity to learn about organic intelligence. In this podcast series, you'll get stories. I'm an inveterate. I'm an unceasing storyteller. You'll get geeky science. You'll hear more about biophilia and the love of life and the love of nature, and the embrace, really, of the understanding that we are now the family of life. We're all in this big boat on planet Earth, and if you resonate with this, if you, like me, believe with others that we should be judged by the content of our character, not on the basis of our productivity or our social status or the car that we drive. If you want to be successful as a human being, then we begin at this basic level of the human biology, and then find the fractal organization in which we can be responsible for ourselves, be responsible for one another. We can delve into relationship from the most basic contact with nature in orientation, the human connection and intimacy and love, and also the larger dimensions of relationship in the cosmos. Organic intelligence. We're looking for the end of trauma so that we can join together for life on the planet and on behalf of the life on the planet. I look forward to talking with you in our next podcast. Thanks for tuning in.